Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chad Erickson, Vice President of Marketing and Sales at Advice Media, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar this month. We are very, very excited for the topic and for our presenter today. And I'll get to that in a minute. I just couldn't be more excited to actually learn. As I was talking with Carrie yesterday and kind of prepping for this, I told her, I said, I've been looking forward to this for a few months. Just to continue to gain knowledge myself and to know what's going on and the trends that she has seen and continues to see in the industry. So this is going to be very, very powerful. You're going to want to take copious notes. It's a good thing we have also got this recorded so you can come back to it often and use it as a reference. I wanted to, again, welcome everyone here and let you know that kind of our format, especially if you're your first time coming into our webinar today. We have our control panel, and throughout that, invite you to, at any time, ask any questions. I will be moderating those questions, and I'll save all of your questions until the end. Again, feel free to ask them at any time, so you don't have to wait till the very end. If you think about something as it's coming up, go ahead and ask it, and I'll just, at the end of the presentation, I'll give your questions to Carrie so that she can answer those. Again, it is being recorded, and tomorrow, probably by midday to maybe the same time tomorrow, this will be available on our website as well as our YouTube page. You'll also get a notification directly from GoToWebinar to let you know that that recording is there, so you can go back and watch it and hope that this information is helpful to you. But let me go ahead and introduce our presenter today, Carrie Lycan, and Carrie comes with a tremendous amount of experience, which you're going to see from her bio, and you're going to pick that up immediately as she begins to talk today. So Carrie Lycan joined Yext as the company's first head of industry for healthcare. In her role, Lycan leads all healthcare-related activities, including product and partnership development. She's an expert in healthcare and technology, and for almost 20 years has gained experience in healthcare and health policy through government, legal, nonprofit, and for-profit sectors. For 8.5 years, she worked at Google building their healthcare team, helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient journey, digital's impact on patient and customer acquisition, and how to drive increased revenue and sales through digital channels. She has regularly been quoted in media, including Forbes and Business Insider, and regularly speaks across the country on topics related to healthcare and technology. Lycan holds a degree in public policy and political science from Duke University and a Master of Public Policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where she focused on health policy. And again, it's my esteemed pleasure to welcome Carrie today. So Carrie, go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Oh, thanks, Chad, so much. I'm so excited to be here today. I love talking about these types of healthcare and technology, especially search topics. So it is just my pleasure to be able to share this information with you today. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can change. There we go. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to demystify Google. After I've spent 8.5 years at Google learning about how people search and what people do when they're looking for healthcare at these different crisis moments or research moments, there are a couple of things that you want to think about with respect to Google itself and how to understand what you need to do to drive patient acquisition because you understand Google better. And just for context, I can tell you that the patient journey has changed quite a lot over the last 12 or so years. And so Chad mentioned that I spent 8.5 years at Google. I've spent 3 years now at Yext. And so if we combine that time, I can tell you that when I first started at Google, I helped to build the healthcare team out of the Google Boston office, and we had some internal tools that we were able to access to understand how people search for healthcare. We had this internal tool for all verticals, so we could understand how people search just in general, but I was only concerned with healthcare because I was trying to build the healthcare team and understand just the behaviors themselves. And what I know from 12 years ago is that people would search very simply. They would just have a computer on their desk and they would search for a doctor near me or a cardiologist near me. But that would pretty much be it. So in our internal tool, we would see a lot of this type of search behavior. As the years went on, and especially as mobile devices started to gain pocket share, and you could find the mobile devices being pulled out in doctors' offices, we started to see it shift in how people searched and what we were seeing in that internal tool. So it was less of just a doctor near me and more of find me the best cardiologist in Manhattan, or cardiologist who treats mitral valve repair, or dentist who does extractions. So the search started to get more complicated, and we started to see search volume increase as well. Then 3 years ago, when I left Google to become the head of healthcare at Yext, where I work very closely with lots of different teams, and I run surveys so that I can understand and continue to keep a pulse on patient search behavior. What we're seeing internally with our own customers, but then also just with our own external surveys, is that we're seeing even more complex searches. So the patient journey starts with a search. People are searching, and I'll go through one of these multidimensional searches later on in the presentation. But as that search starts to happen, you have to think about, wow, the complexity here. How do I ensure that I can get in front of it? And if people are searching, they're likely starting with Google, with Bing, with Yahoo, with some sort of search engine experience to start. And because Google has the greatest market share of search behavior, I thought I would talk a little bit about how to actually understand Google and the search engine results page and how you can control that, and also understand the complexities now that you need to think about with respect to how people are searching for healthcare. So this is me. I'm Carrie Lycan, the head of industry at healthcare. And just talking a little bit more about just overarching trends for healthcare specifically, there are 3 things that I think a lot about when I'm talking to healthcare organizations. And I talk to organizations from huge enterprise level organizations like New York Presbyterian, for an example. I talk to DSOs, so I could be talking to Aspen Dental or Pacific Dental. I also talk to practice groups and individual doctors as well. So regardless of the size of the organization or the audience, these trends still ring true. So the first is that the healthcare consumer is far more empowered today than ever before. And not only that, they are, and we switched to the far right here, there are these evolving payment models, and that empowered healthcare consumer is financially responsible for more of their care now today than ever before. So if you combine those two just right now, there is this trend of somebody who has a healthcare need, who knows that they can find a lot of their information online. And on top of it, they're now more incentivized to actually do the search, because they have to try to find out who is the best, who accepts my insurance, who is near me, who's convenient. But then also, if there is a point of comparison opportunity happening, then they need to be able to do that as well. And especially perhaps in the near future, because healthcare is becoming so consumerized, they need to figure out, how can I figure the pricing possibility with respect to healthcare as well. And then this middle trend here, the evolution of personalized care. Not all care is the same anymore. And so if we have these genetic viral vectors going in, and we're treating certain genetic types of cancer differently than we would have treated in the past, how is that also being translated to personalization of care in a clinical setting, and then also personalization of care even before you get to the doctor? So people are thinking about, how do I find my care? It's a personalized journey that they're taking to get the care. And then once they get into the doctor's office, there's a completely different way of treating that patient for the same condition that somebody else might have. So it's a personalized approach. So with these 3 industry trends, I think it's shaking up the healthcare environment quite a bit. And I think that there are a lot of things to learn, and there's a lot of pieces of digital that have their sticking points within here that can really help to drive patient acquisition. So I believe that a shift in strategy can lead to more revenue. So whether you're a small organization, a small practice group, a large organization, no matter what, digital should be and can be the foundation of driving patient acquisition. And when we think about the commercially insured patient, we also know from some of my data that they're 1.5 times more likely to be online than publicly insured patients. So digital is a big piece of where energy and attention should be a main focal point for how to drive patient acquisition. And the media mix of thinking about how do you get your message out? How do you understand how to reach that patient? That needs to change as well. And patient and consumer behavior is far more digital again. So that mix needs to start to slide more toward, how do I think through Google? How do I think through my website? How do I think through all the other websites and digital presence, and even maybe online appointment scheduling and other elements of a digital experience? How do I think about that before I think about anything else? For example, TV or billboards or any other more traditional media type of focal point for marketing. And then finally, one of my most favorite things, because I did see this when I was at Google and we continue to even see it more so today, is that patients are asking questions and they're seeking answers more than ever before. And each question is an opportunity for you to answer it on behalf of the patient so that you have the greatest opportunity to get in front of that patient so that you can convert that patient into someone who will come into the office and book an appointment. So we're being trained to search differently. So what's fascinating about this screenshot that I was able to take is that Google has now, over the last couple of years, instituted this autocomplete. And if you can see my mouse, I'm hovering my mouse over all of these other little results that populated under this search. So I typed in orthopedic surgeon in New York City who accepts Blue Cross Blue Shield. And what happens when you type this into Google is that oftentimes Google will autocomplete and then auto-populate commonly asked questions or commonly asked search terms that are related to what it is that you're searching for. And they populate only those that have been searched over and over and over again. And so because we're being trained to search differently, we actually are starting to see in our data that people are searching in these really complex ways, and it's not just a one-time thing. So this particular search about orthopedic surgeon in New York City who accepts Blue Cross Blue Shield, as you can see with the autocomplete or the populate down below, these similar questions down below, these are also really complex search queries that people have typed in over and over and over again. So it's not just this one search query, orthopedic surgeon in New York City who accepts Blue Cross, but it's all these other ones, like doctors that accept Blue Cross Blue Shield near me, or Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia, find a doctor, or Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. So there are these more complex search terms that people are looking for more answers about. 68% of people search on mobile devices for healthcare specifically. This information came from 2016, and I believe it's Hitwise data that was reported in Search Engine Land. And I love this stat because not only is it from 2016 and we're now in 2019, so I would assume that this data has gone even further up, upwards of probably 70, 75%, maybe even 80%. But it also signifies a significant transition in what's actually going on with patient behavior. So every healthcare organization I start to talk to about this, they confirm that they're starting to see with their own analytics that patients have passed the 50% mark with accessing information on mobile devices. So when I was at Google, I would see that people would probably be accessing health information more so on a desktop and then a little bit of the time on mobile. And we saw some of the shift move more toward 50-50. But now what I'm hearing is that that shift has even surpassed and crossed the 50% line, upwards of this 60 to 68% number. So if we know that people are on these mobile devices, we also know that the mobile device is highly accessible and you can pull it out of your pocket at any moment in time, whether you're in the doctor's office or you're walking down the street, which I see a lot in New York City, and sometimes I run into people. But anytime you have a question, you pull out that mobile device and then you want to know an answer. So you ask a complex question, you look at your mobile device for the answer, then you ask more questions, you continue to ask and question, ask and search, and you continue to do that until you find the answer that you want. But what we also see is within the context of a healthcare search, 3 out of 4 people are actually searching for providers rather than physical locations. So there's this whole search journey that people take, and along that journey, they're trying to find a lot of information. They want to know different elements and components of, is this doctor near me? Does the doctor accept my insurance? Does this doctor have expertise? What's the doctor rating? How do I compare? What about this symptom? How do I think about it? But when it comes down to finally making an actual action and taking that action, it comes down to the doctor. I'm looking for a doctor 3 out of 4 times I'm searching. So this is a really important piece of thinking about how to understand when we get into the Google and the search engine results page, what we're needing to focus on. I also hear that because these older consumers are more or less the main consumers of healthcare, a lot of times people will say, but older consumers aren't really digitally inclined, or they're not really interested in using digital mechanisms to find information. They're using the phone. And we have a lot of data to show that that's actually not true. And if I could show pictures of, I've seen a lot of like a group of 4 or 5 women who are at least over the age of 75, all on their mobile devices. They're probably playing games, but they're using mobile devices. What we see here is 1 in 3 age 45 plus search for healthcare online. That's from Yext survey data that we've run year over year in the last couple of years. And what's really fascinating is if we think about the adoption of voice and voice devices like Alexa, like Siri, like Google Assistant and Google Home, we saw the highest increase of all age groups, 27.6% increase in voice device use for healthcare specific questions and reasons in the 65 plus year old group. My assessment on this is that older consumers are a little bit more afraid of breaking something. So they're afraid of breaking something on a screen or on their mobile device. But when it comes to actually asking a question and doing so in a conversational way, it's easier to do it on a voice device. And so that may be one of the reasons why we're seeing an uptick and a higher percentage increase in that use for this particular age group. But older consumers are definitely digital, they're definitely online, they're definitely doing their searches. So it's important to not exclude them from this set and to start migrating away a little bit from the overall notion that the older consumer isn't digital, because we know for a fact from data that that's not true. So as I was talking about this before, but the patient journey starts with a question. And I used to talk about the patient journey as a circular journey. So it was a self-feeding journey. It started with a discovery, like I need to find some information about a symptom, and then it would move after doing the research, then it would move over to selection. So you need to narrow things down. You're searching for a doctor. You end up booking an appointment with a doctor, and then you go to the third point, which is the point of care. And at that point of care, you have a patient experience. You have a front desk experience. You have a parking experience. You have a bedside manner experience with the doctor, and then you have a post experience where what's the checkout like, and then how do you move on and think about, well, how did I feel about that? So you move into a feedback experience. So you give feedback, and that feedback used to feed selection of a doctor for somebody else who is suffering from a similar condition. Now what I'm starting to see is less of that type of journey and more of a journey of people asking questions, seeking information, and doing their research on various different places like search engines and reviews and videos and blogs, but then learning more and then searching and honing in their search and asking more questions about what they just learned. And when they ask that next question, then they go to another set of websites or to other search engines or maybe even provider pages or healthcare specific sites. They learn a little bit more, and then they ask another, maybe more tailored question, and they keep on going through this whole process until they get to the point of conversion, which hopefully is a book an appointment, either through a call or if you have online appointment scheduling through online means. So you can see here through these questions that they're a little bit different too. So the first question is, who is the best orthopedic surgeon near me? That can lead me to a number of blue links and other different resources that I can consult, which then would lead me to another question where it's related to knee. So who is a knee surgeon near me, rated 4 stars and accepts Cigna? It's a far more complex question that somebody is asking, which will then result in different resources that are then consulted. And in those resources, there's more research that takes place, and somebody says, oh, that's interesting. There's somebody named Dr. Smith who fulfills that criteria. So let me see if this Dr. Smith actually operates on Tuesdays. It's the only day that I'm available to have elective knee surgery. So trying to find out that availability might actually be quite hard. So there's a consultation of a lot of different sites, and then all of a sudden, there is a question because you realize, wow, maybe this Dr. Smith has the opportunity to operate on Tuesday, but I didn't get the question answered that I could be a new patient and doctor would see me. So the doctor would see me and I have Cigna, so Dr. Smith accepts Cigna, but does the doctor accept new patients? So finding out that answer to that question means that it needs to consult a number of other websites and other different resources before I'm able to actually book an appointment. So there are a lot of different elements to how people are actually getting to you, but at the end of the day, it's an understanding of the questions that people are asking, where they're finding the answers, and then how are they continuing to ask the questions until it's sufficient enough for them to feel comfortable to book an appointment. I like to always say that you can't control what device a patient is going to use to do the research. You can't control where the patient is going to be to actually conduct that research. And you also can't, for the number 3 component of it, is you can't determine or you can't guide where that patient is necessarily going to say, okay, it's time for me to book an appointment. So you just have to make sure that you have the opportunity to show up everywhere and answer those questions anywhere where they're asking. So these are real questions that consumers are asking. We have this from our data, from internal customer data. So as an example, if you don't believe that people aren't asking questions that are this complex, take a look. So psychiatrist that is within the medical center actually they type it in like this, so it's really not grammatically correct. Psychiatrist that is within the medical center takes Cigna Gold insurance. Another question that was asked of another customer is walk-in clinics near me that accept Health Springs insurance. Okay, Google, give me the top cardiology doctor in Boston. And then dentist near me for emergency extraction accepting Delta. These are legitimate questions that people are asking. So the question is, can you answer those questions? And how does Google treat them? So what is this? This type of query is a multi-dimensional search query. So for example, if you're taking a look at any of these questions, and you have many of them too, I'm sure, trying to drive people to you, this is a multi-dimensional search query that we broke apart, and we tried to make sure that we're able to highlight what these different entities are that make up the query. So best primary care provider near me accepting patients who is rated 4 stars. If I were to break down this search query into its dimensions, one of them is rating designation best. Then the primary category of an entity is primary care provider, or maybe it could be an orthopedic surgeon or dentist, or it could be a cosmetic surgeon, whatever it might be. That is an entity of a category of the doctor or the type of doctor. Geography is really important. A lot of times people are looking for a doctor who is near me or nearby. And then a custom attribute we think about is accepting patients. Are you accepting patients? Are you not? Do you accept Blue Cross or not? Do you accept Cigna or not? What about Delta Dental or not? And then who's rated 4 stars is another quality rate or rating designation. So you can take a look at any number of these questions and break down their different entities so that you can start to think about how are we able to answer these questions, and do we even have this data to begin with? Organizing the data, even before you think about Google and how to demystify it, Google relies on structured data sets in order to get the information they need to supply to the searcher, and it's all about organizing data in the first place. So make sure you can answer these types of questions, and that will help set you up for understanding how to drive more patients on Google. And search engines use a knowledge graph to answer questions, so you have to build this yourself as well. So the funny thing is, in 2012, when I was at Google, I remember when they made this big announcement and they said, Google has launched its knowledge graph. And I thought to myself, well, that certainly sounds really interesting, but what exactly is a knowledge graph? And a knowledge graph is basically just entities and relationships. So in this example that I have here, a provider might work in a certain location and have a certain specialty. So a provider is a cardiologist, works at 123 Main Street, and maybe accepts Cigna insurance. So you can relate all of these different entities to one another. And the reason the Googles of the world and Amazon has a knowledge graph and Facebook has a knowledge graph and pretty much anywhere where you can search for information, they're all now relying on knowledge graphs. And they do that because they're seeing so many different searches happen, and they're all unique. And so you have to figure out how to, from their perspective, they have to figure out how to connect all of these dots together. So, wow, this person is searching for a dentist near me for emergency extraction accepting Delta. Well, dentist is in a certain location and does emergency extractions and also accepts Delta. So somehow very quickly, the search engines of the world need to be able to go out into the ecosystem, try to find one of those dentists that actually fulfills that particular search and bring that back in a matter of micro mini milliseconds. So they are relying on a knowledge graph that has these entities and relationships, and they need you to be able to give them the data to be able to populate onto Google. So more questions being asked means more answers need to be provided, and that means just taking all of these entities and connecting the dots. So let's walk through the SERP, and I purposely put SERP here because that's what we refer to as the search engine results page. So when Google is calling upon the knowledge graph for every single one of the searches that happens, the search engine results page is the results that we get at the end of the day. So what is it? Search engine results page is this page, and I purposely used a desktop example, even though more and more people are using mobile devices, only because you can get more rich visual here. But just think about this on a mobile device as well. So when you type into the Google search box something that you're looking for and you're asking a question, when you hit search, you will get this search engine results page. So you can see here I searched for a pediatrician near me who accepts Blue Cross. So what we see here are a couple of blue links, and then also the people also ask components, which are big now. So Google is trying very hard to generate more and more of these people also ask so that they can keep you on Google as opposed to send you away to these blue links. So let's break down the search engine results page, or the SERP. So if I'm looking for a particular doctor, and I'm looking here for Paul Boynet, MD, Boston, I see here the search engine results page, and you see that there are some blue links on the left-hand side. These are considered natural search results. And then I see this nice little visual on the right-hand side. This is called a knowledge card. So we're going into a full 101 here. So the knowledge card is what Google launched in 2012 in its attempt to say, I am going to go and I'm going to pull all of this structured data and I'm going to pull it all in, and I'm anticipating what it is that you're actually looking for. And I want to put it into a nice little card on the search engine results page and hope that you can find the information you are looking for so you don't have to click on any blue links anymore. So what we see here in the knowledge card is really interesting. We see that there are opportunities to add images. They have a little map marker for most of these knowledge cards. There's even a video component to it sometimes, and sometimes it's just an outside view of if you're navigating and you need to access this information so you can visually see where you need to go. But then we also see the name. We see these 3 buttons where you can click on a website or you can get directions. You can even save the information as well. You have a category, so this particular doctor is a cardiologist and is categorized as such in a location in Boston. And then there's a lot of name, address, phone type information on this knowledge card as well. So the address, making sure that that hopefully is the right address and that address corresponds with the map marker. And then a lot of times what Google is doing now with the knowledge card is making sure that they're showing whether you're open or closed. And for that reason, we've actually talked to Google about this. It's interesting. Google treats people like restaurants. So what's interesting about people is that they're not always necessarily open and closed, but they are, but it's a little bit weird to showcase that they're open and closed like you would showcase a restaurant. But they do show hours and then phone, and then you can suggest an edit, or you can also see additional information if that is provided. So this is the knowledge card, and this is the structured data set that Google loves. They prioritize it, they want all the information they can, but they are not necessarily incentivized to ensure that the data is correct. What they do want to do is they would just want to make sure that they don't have any empty pieces of this data. So what Google typically does is they just go out and they buy data sets. And those data sets that they buy don't necessarily need to be accurate data sets. In fact, a lot of times they're buying data from data brokers. And those data brokers might be collecting data over the course of years and years. They're not verifying or validating the data. They're just making sure that they have a full set of data that they can sell off to somebody else like Google. So that's why you might find that the information might be incorrect on the knowledge card. Now, if you structure your data in a way that enables Google to read it, and then you put it into like a platform or some way of actually controlling it, even through Google My Business, and you send that data to Google, they should prioritize accepting it and then the information should be controlled and correct. This is what you typically will also see on mobile devices. This is also what you will hear when you ask Google Assistant or Google Home. They're calling upon this information. So if you say, is Paul Boyne open right now? And you can see here that he's closed. So Google Home should say, no, Paul Boyne is currently closed. So this information is a feeder for many different things on Google, but then also for other Google elements like Google Assistant, Google Home, and perhaps more in the future. These on the left are third-party sites. So many times when you're searching for a doctor or you're searching for somebody's asking a question, what will happen is you may or may not see a knowledge card. And if you do see a knowledge card, you probably can get your answer to your question on that knowledge card. But if you're doing more of the more broad type searches, like I'm looking for a cardiologist near me and I want to know if they are accepting Blue Cross or they do some sort of mitral valve repair. I love using mitral valve repair, by the way, so you'll probably hear me say that a million times. But what you'll tend to see is these blue links that show up on the left-hand side of the search engine results page. These are what we would term third-party sites. They also collect data, and they buy data from a lot of different data brokers as well. And they also get data from structured data set owners that can send the data through APIs. These types of sites could be anywhere from Yelp to healthcare sites like Vitals or US News to any other kind of blog. I mean, it could be any types of sites. But these are places where it's also really important to ensure that you understand where your information lives and that you can control the information there. But also, people click on these links from Google, so it's really important to ensure consistency as well. So this is the third-party sites as the SERP or the search engine results page is concerned, and so Google is still trying to pull in those blue links for now and wanting to match whatever they can because they've gone out and crawled the internet ecosystem and said, oh, that's interesting. This guy, Paul, he showed up on US News and on Vitals and Healthgrades and others. He showed up there, so we're going to pull that in as part of our search results, as part of the algorithm that pulls in the data. So then again, we have one other blue link, and what we tend to see is if you have an individual provider page as part of your website, Google tends to, not always, but Google tends to prioritize showing a provider page as one of the first or second search results. So this is what we would consider a provider page. It's not a third-party site because it's not one of these third-party websites where information can be gathered from everywhere or anywhere, but it should be, and hopefully is, a place where your information lives that you own. And there are ways that you can optimize to make sure that it can show up in hopefully the #1 or #2 spot. Nothing can ever be guaranteed on Google because they're constantly changing the algorithm. But it's really important to think about how you can own all of this. You have full control over this, the provider page. You should be able to control your knowledge card, and then hopefully you'll be able to also send information to these third-party sites as well, so that you basically can own everything. Now, in this case, there's one more piece of the search engine results page that I didn't cover in this type of search, but I wanted to show you what it is. But I couldn't find one for this doctor, so I had to do a different search, but I wanted to show you what a Google ad is. So if you're not familiar with AdWords or Google Ads, is what they've now rebranded it as, I wanted to show you an example of what this looks like, because sometimes it's important for you to own the ad space as well, although quite honestly, I don't think it's all that important. I know that is part of my old world from being at Google, but if you can own this experience, this full experience with the knowledge card and the third-party sites and your own provider page, it doesn't really mean that you need to go full on with the ads unless you are in a competitive situation or you want to gain a number of different types of analytics. So I'm happy to talk offline about that type of strategy. It's really important in some circumstances. So this is what a Google ad is. And this ad is usually, no, it's not even usually, it's always first. So Google will always prioritize the ad above pretty much everything else on the search engine results page. So sometimes there can be one ad, sometimes there can be 4 ads on a mobile device, sometimes 3, sometimes 2, it just depends. And this is all based on people who bid for a position. And so depending on how many people are in this AdWords auction, people will say, I want to buy a certain keyword and I'm willing to pay X amount of dollars for a click on that ad if the ad is shown for that keyword. So here, only one person probably, or Mount Sinai Urgent Care, they only bid on this particular search. So they're winning this slot. They won this auction. But generally speaking, we see more of this type of result in doctor-specific searches than we do for this. But I did want to introduce the ad just so that you know that I'm not missing or neglecting the fact that there are ads associated with the search engine results page. But what I am going to focus on more is just this whole experience so that you can see what it's like to control that. And if you had any questions about ads, I'm happy to sync afterward. So let's talk a little bit about that opportunity. You can drive patient acquisition by controlling it all. And it might seem like it's a little daunting or a little tough or crazy or insane to try to do it all, but it really isn't if you think very strategically about it. So how do you own Google? First, you want to identify where your data lives and who owns your data. So depending on how big you are as an organization or as a provider or as a practice group or however large you are, you probably have data that can answer questions that I was talking about before. Data can live in a lot of different places. You may or may not have credentialing. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you may or may not have a facilities department, or you may have multiple locations, but where does the information about that live? Maybe you have a content management system for your website. So where would that information live if you have information that you're putting out into the world via your CMS? You could likely have it on Excel spreadsheets. You might have it in a CRM tool. You could have it in lots of different places. So the first step is to think about where your data lives, about your name, your address, your phone, what conditions you treat, when you see patients, what your office hours are. Do you only see patients at certain locations on Mondays and Thursdays? What about Tuesdays and Fridays? What about when people are searching for certain types of symptoms? Can you try to figure out how you would treat certain symptoms and where you would do that? So where does that information live today? And if it doesn't live somewhere, how can you start to pull it together? It's really important to identify where that lives, because you want to start thinking about, for yourself or for your organization, you want to think about building your personal knowledge graph, because you need to be able to connect your personal knowledge graph or your data set to these public knowledge graphs that I was talking about before, like to the Googles of the world and to the third parties of the world and to others. So patients search on Google for information, but like I was saying before, they click on other websites, and Google is trying hard to keep people on Google. But those third-party websites that I was talking about before, they are sending people off. People do a lot of research, and they do click on the blue links. So it's really important to think about, A, getting that data together, build your own knowledge graph, but then syndicating it and syncing it to the public knowledge graph so that you can make sure it's up to date everywhere. So anywhere where you have a chance to acquire a patient should be where your information should live. Google is the biggest place. And if we go back and we take a look at this search engine results page, these third-party sites here are coming up in Google search results. So you do need to figure out, how can you own as many of those blue links as possible and the information that lives within it. And each one of those have their own knowledge graph. So how do you sync to them from your own data set that you've pulled together? So that is how you own that first piece of third-party data. So then what you also want to think about is, how do you manage reviews? Part of the Google algorithm, which I mean, I can tell you from my experience having worked at Google, I had a fancy little badge, and it was a hologram, and it was really fun to look at because it would actually change, and we had these little Google balls all over it, so we could tell if we had counterfeit badges or not, or somebody was trying to get into our offices and they had a counterfeit badge. So it was a really neat badge. And we would go to the main campus in Mountain View, and it was it felt like a college campus. It was this huge campus, and you could walk around, and your badge could get you in pretty much anywhere. And one of the big things that we used to do was go cafe hopping. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. How in the world did this company even, I mean, how did these people even work? They were constantly playing all the time. And it is sort of true. We had a lot of fun at Google. We ate really well at Google, but they had offered lots of different options for food. So we would go from one building one day to the next building another day, and we would just badge ourselves in, and we would go to the cafe. Maybe we would eat Mexican food one day, and then we'd eat healthy, all natural food the next day, and then we'd go to get a Chinese food. Like, they would have all these different options. But then there were certain buildings on campus where our badges didn't work. And the big piece about that was that Google was very strict about separating church and state, what we referenced it as. They did not let anyone who worked on the business side of Google to get anywhere near or even enter the building where the algorithm folks and the natural search results folks worked. They had their own cafe. We weren't allowed to use it. We weren't even allowed to, we couldn't even go get water in the micro kitchen in that building. So our badges didn't work. So they never would tell anyone how the algorithm worked. We never could influence it. They never wanted anyone to have any part of it. But 2 falls ago, they did let us know, the entire public, that there were 3 things that could help you better understand the Google algorithm. And the 3 things that they found to be most important were distance, relevance, and prominence. Distance is really important because when somebody is searching for something, most especially healthcare, Google will surface up a result that is in a reasonable distance of where that person is searching. So a lot of times you're getting that from an IP address or from your GPS on your mobile device. Relevance is, of course, if you're searching for a dentist, Google doesn't want to serve a search result of an orthopedic surgeon. So how relevant is the search result to what it is that the searcher was looking for? Prominence is what is related to reviews. So Google was placing a big bet on the fact that people are finding a lot of reviews interesting and making decisions and clicking on things based on reviews. So the prominence has to do with how many reviews you have, how frequently people have reviewed you and your practice, and when, like how recently have people reviewed you. And if you're managing that and you're collecting that information, you're driving more attention to that, then Google will say, oh, that's interesting. That is an active listing of the doctor and an active way of representing the doctor out into the ecosystem. I will go and I will prioritize bringing that doctor to the forefront of the search engine results page, and I will send that to the searcher. So there's 2 steps here to make sure that you're managing the reviews, because you need to be able to own this here. So a lot of times you'll see a review here, a lot of times you'll see star ratings here. Google actually pulls these star ratings in. And if you're putting star ratings on your own provider page, you would see a review via star ratings here. So Google will always pull that because the visual enhances and entices people to click. So Google wants the click if they can get the click, and they also want to serve up the most important information to someone. And reviews are an indicator that people are looking for things and wanting to find more recent relevant things. So 2 things you can think about if you don't do anything with reviews today is, number 1, start to monitor your reviews. Get those reviews from as many places as you possibly can. Collect that data, start to see what are the key themes. What do you need to be thinking about? What do you need to be worrying about? Where should you be rewarding people? What should you be doing about it? And then once you collect and monitor that, if you haven't done that before, just collect your data. Once you get the data, then build a strategy for response. You may only need to respond to a certain number of reviews. You may need and want to respond to all of them, but Google prioritizes the activity that happens on especially their reviews. So you do want to start paying a little bit of attention to those. 70.9% of people said reviews are somewhat or very important to the selection of a provider. So not only does Google think that reviews are good and want to prioritize those, but it's also important that people are saying through survey data that this is a very important component to how they select a provider. And what we found is in our own data at Yext, 26% of patients said they would actually change a decision to see a provider if they read a poor review about the one they wanted to see or they were planning to see. So it's really important to think about, how do you manage it? How do you actually get to the point where you can start to generate more positivity and more action on these reviews. It impacts your search engine optimization, it impacts the search engine results page, and it also impacts patient acquisition. So I'll just go through this really quickly. What can you do for monitoring and analyzing? What are some best practices? So who would be looking at these reviews? So you might want a practice manager or patient experience or a marketing team looking at the reviews. They want to see the insights. What processes you need to think about? How do you need to put some processes in place? You collect the data and you figure out, do I need some notifications? Do I need to create some dashboards? Do I need any integrations? But of that, do we need to take these reviews and build a process around them? And then how often should I be looking at the reviews? You can do it real time, but maybe you don't have enough time to do it real time. So maybe you just run some reports and then you start to take a look at some of that and you start to build some processes around maybe weekly or monthly activity, or you can build some custom reports. So it's you can take a look at all of this information and it ultimately impacts Google and what they do. And then of course it gives you some impact for your patients. So you can see what's being said, you can improve your operations, you can stay ahead of trends, and you can increase your results of making sure that, like on Google itself, you get to show as many times and control as many experiences as possible as the patient is doing the search. So then finally, step 4, you want to ensure your website is up to date. So this is the big thing about the search engine results page, like I was saying before. So if we go all the way back to this result here, we see here that this is the owned page. So here, this is a provider page for a health system, but you can think about your own website. Your own website, you should have a provider page for yourself or for the doctors within the practice. And what you want to do is not spend a ton of time on the website, because people are finding information outside of the website more than they are on your website. But you want to make sure that there's this one component to it that Google is now basically saying that every website needs. If you want to show up on Google, you want to show up in voice search because Google is sending information and data in a structured way to voice devices. If you don't have this schema markup language on your website, you basically now don't even get to enter into the results consideration set. So what is schema? Schema is a language that all of these tech companies decided to use and utilize about 20 years ago. They came together and they said, we need to build a language for machines and a language for robots. Because in traditional sense, the way people used to create websites, they used to do lots of tagging. So they would do all of these back-end meta tags on websites for search engine optimization. So you could stuff these websites with as much as you can, because the algorithm used to crawl the back end of the website to see, do they see these tags? Oh, if they see the tags, that's great. Well, we're going to go ahead and show this result on Google. Now Google's basically did an about shift, and all of these other tech companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Yahoo and others, they said, we created a language that allows for machines now. So we don't have crawlers anymore. We just have these machines and this AI. And all these AI bots go out and they just read all of this language. So I'll show you what it looks like. It looks sort of like this. So on the right side here, you can see what the tag actually looks like. So you tag the back end of your website, and then what happens is you fill in the tag with all of the information that's related to whatever that tag is. So we can see here the opening hours on Monday from 8 to 4:30. We can have a link to an image for the doctor. So you basically say your website is now able to send information through this special language to voice devices, to search engine results, to map results, and to the knowledge card. So you basically now structure your data, add the tags to the back end of your website, and then allow for all of this information to consistently be sent through all of this now AI and all of these bots all throughout the ecosystem. So schema is the language for robots to read your website. So the left, this is the language of your website. On the right, these are the tags that you put on the back end of your website, and this is how you fill it in through a structured data set. Schema also changes quite a bit. So the language is constantly being updated, and it has updated in the course of January 2016 to January 2017. That language, or the vocabulary within the language, changed over 200 times. So these companies are constantly coming up with new language, new additions and vocabulary additions, so that you're constantly needing to monitor the back end of this, so that when people are asking these questions on Google, Google's going out and looking for what they can find through this language. And if they can't find it with you, but they can find it with somebody else, they're more likely now to pull that result back up to the first or second result on Google. So how would you even have any idea or know if you're properly schema tagged? So this is actually my husband. My husband is a doctor. He works at Mass General Hospital, and his website, his profile page on the MGH website is schema tagged, but it's not properly schema tagged. So I want to show you how to do this so you can check your own website. So all you need to do is go into the Google Structured Data Testing tool. And that is all. You just have to literally go to Google and type in Structured Data Testing tool, and it'll take you to this free tool that Google has. And all you have to then insert into the tool is the URL of the website. So I took the URL of his web page, his provider page on MGH's website, and I input it into the tool and I hit enter. So we can see here from the Structured Data Testing tool what the machines and what the robots read him as. They see my husband, his name is Brian, and he is a provider. They see him categorized as a hospital. So anytime somebody is asking about Brian on a mobile device, they're searching for him on a Google Assistant or a Google Home, or they're even looking on a laptop. When Google is going out and looking for an answer to the question about Brian, they think of him and they're looking at him behind the scenes as a hospital. So they're less likely to actually return information back from him because they think he's a hospital, not a provider. So you can see here that his schema is actually really a mess. So the only thing that there is related here is street address or his location and zip code. There's no image associated with it. There's no operating hours. Like, if somebody said, does Dr. Brian Skako, does he work on Mondays at 3? The machine would have no idea to say yes or no here. They'd have no idea to actually return a result. So it's really important to think about, how do you properly schema tag? So how would you know? So here's Dr. Boyne again, same example. This is a provider page, and this is what happens when you type him into and you insert his URL into the Structured Data Testing tool. He is categorized not as a hospital, but as a physician. And what this organization was able to do was take all of the different things and all of the different categories and entities of questions that somebody could be asking and put them into the back end of the website via these schema tags, so via this special language and vocabulary, and then insert all of the answers on the right-hand side here. So if I were to say, what is Dr. Boyne's telephone number, Google could come back and actually respond on the search engine results page or in Google Home. It is 617-296-4012. So the more you have the opportunity to get all of this tagging on the back end of your website, the more opportunity you have to show first or second on the search engine results page. So you own that experience. So in conclusion, you really do want to try to figure out how you can own it all. So we went through these 4 steps to be able to think about how you can do that, and how Google tends to prioritize what gets to show versus what doesn't get to show. And at the end of the day, I just read an article about this, in fact, 2 days ago, about how the way of the world is going to structured data. So Google is trying hard to get away from blue links and into more structured data sets. And you can see here how this is starting to take place. So you can own the knowledge card. You can, through structured data and schema tagging, you can own your provider page, like your own page and your own website. And then you can own the data that's on these third-party sites as well. And if you amplify things with reviews, and you can add more opportunity to actually get people to click, because Google then pulls the stars out of your page onto the search engine results page and utilizes distance, relevance, and prominence to treat that algorithm in a way that delivers the right answer to a question people are asking. You can own it all. So 4 steps, just to review. How you can set yourself up for success on Google is, number 1, know where your data lives and who owns it. So make sure you know where the data lives, who owns it, and then how can you start to understand do I work here on Monday, Tuesday, but on Wednesday through Friday I work there and I treat this condition and I accept these insurances. Start to understand where does that data live and how can you collect it. Then the second step is syndicate the data to the public knowledge graphs. You've gotten your data together, you've built your own private knowledge graphs. So how do you connect the dots to the public knowledge graphs like the Googles of the world? Because Google loves the data and the relationships among the different data sets and data points. Number 3, reviews are a huge component to the search algorithm. So manage your reviews, start to look at them, start to understand how do they impact the fact that you can show and own more of that search engine results page. And number 4, ensure your website is up to date. So you don't have to do an entire website overhaul, but for the certain pages, like your own doctor pages, or any of your practice pages or your condition pages, are they up to date? And did you put that special language and vocabulary on the back end? And have you taken a look at the Google Structured Data Testing tool to better understand whether you have good schema tags or not? Make sure you have the language on the back end of your website, because that will help to prioritize to Google, because Google is a robot, it's a machine, and it's AI driven now, to show you versus show others when people are searching. So I have a white paper. In fact, I will give it to Chad because I meant to send it to him yesterday and then I ended up not doing so, but we can make sure to send you the PDF of the white paper if you'd like to read more about this. And I am now open for questions. So thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. Carrie, thank you so much. That was really, really powerful and great information. So lots to consider, and which is really important. So a few questions that came up, and we've got just a few minutes left. But let me see. Here we go. So this is probably the most important one here. Is with your expertise in a prediction, where do you see search going in 1 year, 5 years?
Ooh, I love this question. I was just talking about this. I was talking about this earlier today. I was with NYU Langone Medical Center, and they asked me a similar question. So interesting. So in the next year, I think we're going to see Google pivoting quite a bit into voice. And so I was talking about this before, where Google is relying specifically on structured data sets and being able to deliver things that don't require clicking on a blue link. And what they're trying to do, and what I'm seeing them try to do, is how do I figure out how I can get more and more people to start asking questions on voice devices, whether it's a mobile device through Google Assistant, or it's actually on Google Home, or it's on a Nest device, or it's on your air conditioner or microwave, because there are now 1 billion plus devices with Google Voice or Google Assistant inserted into it. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of emphasis on voice specifically, and how we can get the best answers, or how Google can get the best answers back to the searcher. Then in 5 years, well, no, going back to the 1 year piece, I think if you were to search for today, how tall is Mount Everest, you would actually get a result. It's like something like 29,000 feet. You actually get an answer. Like, you don't have to click on a link for that. You just get an answer on Google. That's where I think Google is going to try to go within the next year. In the next 5 years, things moved, and technology moved so fast when I was at Google. I don't think I can predict what 5 years from now will look like, except that I think that we will probably use desktop devices just at work. Most people will have full access to mobile devices and will be doing like 90% of their searches on mobile devices. And they'll be using voice devices to augment their mobile device. So they'll be second screening it, basically. But as far as what they will be doing, I think they will get into the healthcare game in a big, big way. They're going to hopefully become HIPAA compliant. So people will be trying to figure out how to book appointments just by asking Google that question. And we're already starting to see this in Reserve with Google for things like restaurants and for fitness classes. Once Google becomes HIPAA compliant, I think we're going to see a pretty huge uptick on how different strategies around online appointment scheduling will happen via hands-free devices. So I see that definitely taking off within the next 5 years. But who knows? Who knows what the future will bring? Yeah.
Yeah, it will continue to change. We only have 1 more minute, and we've got a few questions. Let's see, kind of going through some of these questions here. So on the schema data, and this is a good question, because you have so many pages on a website, how many of the pages should include structured data markup on those?
Ooh, good question. I would recommend as many as you can. But if you have analytics and you're able to take a look at your analytics, if you can only prioritize resources for some but not all, take a look at those that have the most traffic and go from there and prioritize from there. I would also say, let's say you have pages for doctors specifically, I would definitely prioritize schema tagging the doctor pages. But I would say try to tag all of them if you can, but I know that sometimes that's not possible. So go with the most traffic to the least traffic and prioritize it that way.
Perfect. We've run out of time, and we've got a few more questions. But for those that have asked questions, particularly on paid search and other schema questions, I know some of your clients. I'll have our teams reach out to you directly. On the paid search one, I will reach out to you directly as well. We're out of time, Amber. I'm sorry, but we will get to that. Carrie, again, thank you so much. And again, as Carrie mentioned, she's going to send me over that PDF. I'll send that out to everyone who attended today, so you'll receive that as well as the recording of this. We post it tomorrow, so be a chance to go back and review, and we're happy to work with you and answer any other questions you have. But this was extremely valuable to understand all this information. So thank you so much, Carrie, and gosh, I wish you all the best.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.